say Kim, the very slim Kim, and the Donald Trump when they interacted. I would say that that's basically the extent of Trump's negotiating power, really, even his administrations.
Hmm.
Because what I've noticed is their negotiation skill when it comes to places is very zero sum game. Like you give us what
Hmm.
you want,
Yeah.
and we'll maybe give you some of what you like, possibly. But we have to have everything one of our
Yeah.
demands demand.
Yeah.
And one a
Yeah.
good example is when he went to North Korea, it was basically did complete denuclearization, and maybe we'll give you a little bit of modernization of an economy.
Yeah,
Um,
it did seem kind of
which
thin soup.
yes. Now I'm not now personally I'm not saying like you give us a nuke and we'll leave South Korea or something of that sort.
Hmm. Yeah.
But you need to give and take a little bit when it comes to these types of negotiations. Like for instance, a good thing. Now you know that North Korean analyst, no, the American analyst who had the kid came up when he was analyzing North Korea back in the day. It was like big on CNN or
Oh,
BBC.
the kid, like the kid who walked into the
And
room
his
while.
mom came
Yeah,
in,
yeah,
and
yeah,
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 yeah, yeah.
yeah. That cute clip.
This
Yeah.
person's actually, while I disagree with a lot of his things, I think I'm to the left of him, but
Hmm.
I think his analyst on his suggestion on this was actually not too bad. That we suggest just to open the door and take a stepping into these conversations.
Yeah.
We don't offer military or strategic positions, but we offer something liquid. And this is going to piss off a lot of people because I remember one of the main complaints about the Iran deal was the cash
Yeah.
given back. But if we give them something liquid in response to maybe 5 nuclear missiles, like maybe money, for instance, then that
Oh,
means we
yeah,
don't
yeah,
don't lose
yeah.
any strategic positions in the area, while we also take the first step into negotiating with
Yeah.
such a regime. Now, the
Yeah.
main issue, of course, from a lot of people would be, well, the liquid assets could be turned into strategic
Right.
assets for North
Yeah.
Korea, but there's no way you're going to make a step into such negotiations without giving something like that. And in my opinion, that is the least strategic asset you could possibly give them,
Yeah.
something liquid.
Cash. Yeah, I see
Yeah.
what you're saying. I mean, I guess if you're trying to make a deal and you want to provide them with something, that's you've got to provide them with something, I suppose.
Yeah, it was. I mean, like, and then because and people will be outraged when I say something of that sort, but then the other things I was like, okay, well, then what's your suggestion? And I was like, do you think we should say we'll stop military, we should stop military operation or training in the region? Well, no. Should we pull out? Well, no. Should we, pull a certain amount of certain equipment out? Well, no. So it's like, okay, then what
What
will
should we
you
do?
do?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and they'll say, well, an investment plan for 2 banks to be. It's like, okay, well, yeah, that's not going to get us nuclear weapons.
Yeah. Yeah. You're telling me. You're telling me. You're telling me that you don't want to invest in Pyongyang.
Yeah.
You're telling me that you don't want to invest in the whole, let me just pull up a picture here. The beautiful metropolis, the hopeful future capital, perhaps dare I dream of a united Korea, Pyongyang. Right here, you're telling me you don't want to invest in this terrifying, literal 1984 dystopia here? It's like we're looking at the friggin' Ministry of Truth. This is their
It's the only
Ryugyong
thing that
Hotel.
shines in the city.
Yeah, what's that?
The only thing that shines in the city.
Yeah, well, actually, this building is the Ryugyong Hotel, and what's I'm probably butchering that pronunciation, but what's fascinating about it is let me show you what it looked like for most of its history. And there are, I believe, last year's name, a lot of these buildings have people, although the hotel itself, I don't believe it does. Here's what the hotel looks like now that it's complete. And again, it's kind of a cool looking building now. However, there's kind of a strange story about this building. So the building itself, for most of its history, actually stood there uncompleted as a giant concrete husk. Exposed to the elements just like this. No windows, no nothing over it. Just a giant incomplete building because when they finished it, or because once they got this up, they ran out of money. I think the Soviet Union collapsed or they ran into some serious economic trouble. And as a result, they couldn't finish the building for I think the better part of 20 years. And so, yeah, it just stood there.
It looks
in
like
the
a
elements.
giant, it looks like a video game prison.
Yeah, it literally is friggin' terrifying. But
You ever seen the fascist Italian Ministry of Truth or whatever with his just Mussolini's face on it?
yes, let me pull that up. It's so creepy. It's so weird looking. Like, how could you not see this? And and conclude that, like, okay, yeah, I think it's safe to say that we're the bad guys at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. Right here, yeah, this is the building you're talking about, right, Dylan? This it's friggin' terrifying. That's Mussolini's face. Like, how you can look at that and not conclude, yep, I guess we're the bad guys. Yeah, we're the bad guys. Yikes.
But yeah. So back to North Korea, as entertaining as Mussolini's face on the side of the
Yeah.
building.
And by the way, shout out again. I don't want to let this go without thanking Benito Mussolini again for saving Western civilization by being the most incompetent belligerent in World War II. If it wasn't for his work in bungling every single Italian military adventure, if he hadn't put Italy in the position of having such giant appetite, such terrible teeth, the Germans might have invaded Russia more quickly, and they might have even won the war.
Specifically with Greece,
Right,
the Germans had to move down,
because Italy invaded Greece. Greece kicked Italy back into Albania, where they invaded from, and the Germans had to rescue the Italians. Basically.
The Albanians must have felt real stupid since they caved in so quickly.
Oh, I mean, it's hard to say, because I mean, I understand why they did, and I mean, you could understand why the Greeks might have, but
I mean,
but
Denmark
Greeks,
is a similar situation.
Yeah. But the Greeks, I mean, fought them back. It was insane. So again, Kite says implying America couldn't have defeated the entire world alone eventually. Perhaps. I guess we did get some nuclear bombs at the end of it, but I think we definitely would be remiss if we didn't shout out the crucial role of Italy in helping undermine Germany's war effort.
Famous proxy allied power.
Oh man, that's a good one. All right. Anyway, I'm sorry to derail you.
But yes. So when I say that, of course, most people, I don't like to say it often because it just sounds very weird. The idea they would give them money for nuclear weapons, but it's just there is not really any way. Like I don't see any other way to acquire these nuclear weapons. I mean, what's the next? Because this is anytime I say that, the only thing I hear from anybody is more sanctions. But we've already sanctioned North Korea as much as you really can sanction them. I don't know what's left to sanction really. And if we continue to sanction, if we get to a certain point, like then the question is of a humanitarian disaster. It's a question. They are holding a country hostage.
Can I show you a 2-minute video that I think illustrates part of the problem with the nuclear weapons?
Sure.
And it's just 2-minute video. I'll play it on the stream. It's pretty funny, so you'll have to turn up the sound. But all right, ladies and gentlemen, this is a great game called Super Kim. Pay attention to the subtitles.
Spiel Super Kim. Du steuerst den kleinen Super Kim durch seine wundersame Welt Super Nordkorea. In deinem Palast fängst du an. Teurer importierter Cognac. Na, jetzt kann's losgehen. Nanu. Hungernde Kinder. Zeit für deinen Special Move. Ignorieren und weitermachen. Sie lieben dich. Oh nein. Ein Sechs-Mächte-Gespräch. Vorsicht, die wollen mit dir verhandeln. Jetzt musst du deinen Supertrick anwenden. Ignorieren und weitermachen. Nachdem du an denen vorbei bist, hol dir deinen Mega-Bonus. Jetzt bist du Super Atom-Kim. Jetzt hast du's fast geschafft. Fehlt nur noch dein Endgegner.
Hallo Super Kim, du darfst jetzt keine edlen Luxusgüter mehr importieren und auch keine total schweren Waffen.
Okay. Ein bisschen zu einfach? Okay, andere hatten einen viel gemeineren Endgegner, die Amerikaner. Aber hey, wer die Bombe hat, muss sich vor keinem mehr fürchten. Das spricht sich schnell rum. Deshalb gibt's jetzt den Multiplayer-Modus. Mit dem Iran, dem Sudan und vielen verrückten Terroristen. Alle haben jetzt die Bombe. Und wenn einer mal keine hat, kannst du sicher mit ihm tauschen. Cognac.
Okay, so it's yeah, it's kind of wacky video, but I mean, how could you really ever? I don't know how you could disarm somebody who didn't want to be disarmed, given the tragic reality that, like, if you have the nuke, you're safe.
Yeah. It is a very persuasive argument, if we were completely honest. It
mean,
really is.
Like these we had somebody call in yesterday who was talking about the iron law of institutions, where they said that that anybody who holds power in or that people who hold power in institutions are generally more concerned with maintaining their power in the institution than they are with maintaining the power of the institution itself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like,
Yes.
to hell with the people of North Korea. I don't care as long as I get to run the show. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I mean, I'm not saying that's always the case, but apparently that's that's a generally observed phenomenon. So, I mean, I just don't know if it's. I don't know if it's possible to disarm somebody peacefully if they don't want to be disarmed.
And that's why negotiation is so important, and while it's so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because I feel like we've had this kind of perception of when we look at a lot of areas, we wait for opportunities.
Yeah.
When it comes to a lot of things, like you wait for a break in a crack in the wall, that sort of thing. But North Korea has generally been able to stop the crack in the wall from expanding, and due partially to help from China, but of course,
Yeah,
it's slave labor, multiple things.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it's a situation that is going to continue to be continue to perpetuate itself, and we need to find some way to negotiate with them going forward. I don't see this solving itself. But
And
but
just
most
to be clear,
presidents,
you mean like directly with North Korea?
yes. But of course, South Korea would have to be involved in any process, and and regional powers as well, like Japan, who their interests are a threat as well.
And I think Guess Who is probably right that China keeps North Korea afloat as a proxy to use against the West. What do you think of that?
Well, of course, that generally is true, but I would say that the idea that I don't think China would want something like South Korea or United Korea that's allied with the West to be directly on their border, and that's the main problem. They already have something similar with that with Vietnam to an extent, but South Korea is much more directly allied with the West due to its precarious situation with North Korea.
Yeah, and South Korea is, I guess, probably more militarily powerful and richer and more capable of defending itself than.
I don't know if we want to say if Vietnam's not capable of defending itself. I think we know that
true.
better than
Yeah,
anybody.
they did. That's no, I meant though. I guess in terms of like if they were gonna, I don't know, maybe just comparing military capacity. But you're right. You're absolutely right. Vietnam is absolutely capable of defending itself.
There's one issue I would say when it comes to I've been studying the South China Sea fascinates me, but the diplomatic chess that's going on there. There is a effort from the Chinese government to basically have an artificial island or expand an island. I forget whether it's like a rock or if it's an artificial island, but to put one that's specifically close enough to Vietnam that they would be able to invade right where the country's thinnest in the event of any event and split the nation in two. And it is probably one of its biggest concerns for Vietnam's national security is that I think someone might be said in the chat.
I'm gonna see if I can find this island. Oh, wait a minute. I think this might be it. Let's see. I'm dropping this map here for everybody to take a look at, and I'll send a link for anybody who's curious. This is just on Wikipedia, but the red line here is China's claims.
Exactly.
And I think the island you may be referencing are the Paracel Islands.
Yep, the Paracel Islands.
And I know they've got bases there, and they start with all they need to start with, I guess, is just some kind of rock, and then they expand it from there.
Exactly, and you can see it directly where they would invade in that long strip between Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City.
Wow. How about that?
So
some of these overlapping claims are insane.
And of course, there's Hainan as a military. They could use that as well, but the more bases they have to launch any offensive from it, of course, the worse situation is for Vietnam. So the conflict when it comes to the South China Sea, for Vietnam at least, is one of its most important national security issues. And I think the biggest mistake we've had in the conflict as of recent I think there's actually this ties in with Iran to an extent, and I can actually bring that up a little bit later. Would be when there was an island claimed by China, and they were claiming it on the international stage, and we did not back up the Philippines, besides with a diplomatic protest.
Yeah, and for those who are curious, these are what some of these Chinese island bases look like. They're kind of like semi-natural aircraft carriers. You know, they build these bases on them. They try to they also want to use them to try and formalize like their economic exclusion zone or exclusive economic zone. So like.
Yeah.
When you've got sovereign territory, you get like, unless it's like split with another country because of the way the borders work out, you get 200 miles around that territory as your exclusive economic zone. And so the Chinese, you don't get that for like a rock in the middle of the ocean, but if you have an island that is a part of the territory of the country because maybe you have routine flights back and forth and you have a couple of tourists and all of that, then you can make a legal claim that this is part of your country, this is part of your exclusive economic zone, and therefore you should be able to, for example, claim all the oil around it. Now, JMRV says EEZ can't be extended with these islands since they're artificial. The Chinese often argue otherwise. So.
I do have commentary on this. I believe it was actually I heard it was The Hague, which confused me a little bit, but I think they also they settle disputes between nations of this sort. And there was a debate on whether these nations were like not nations, but these islands were real islands, and because if they were ruled so, then they would have their own economic exclusion zone, and then of course they would secure not only a strategic focal point, but Chinese shipping, which is extremely important in the event of a conflict for China. Now, the court ultimately ruled that these were not islands due to the fact that they were not they couldn't like maintain themselves by themselves. Like they needed outside forces to constantly keep them sustained as an island.
Yeah,
because you need like population, all these other things, but the population they pointed to were literally like military bases.
It's just transient. Like they were trying to it just wasn't authentic. So
yes,
but
the reason why I'm trying to tie this in with Iran is that since American foreign policy spans so much of the globe, and of course I don't agree with a lot of the part of the globe, but nevertheless, because they span so many parts of the globe, it's hard for us to concentrate like on South China Sea to the amount of attention it would need for our allies in the region, and to the point but when you go from a Chinese perspective, the South China Sea is probably one of its most important issues when it comes to foreign policy, definitely directly in front of it. And so they can concentrate 90 to 80% of their foreign military effort and when it comes to its immediate area in the South China Sea, well, we can maybe dedicate 10% when we have to put 30% over here. And now with the whole Iran situation, we might have to put another 5 to 10% of our attention there, and then we have over there. And so while we're trying to shift all this around the globe, you got to ask how much time is Trump really dedicating to the conflict in the South China Sea and freedom of navigation movement.
Well, I mean,
operations.
Yeah, and even if he can delegate perfectly, still, like, however many American resources you got to send to Iran, that's those are resources you can't send to East Asia.
That is true, and that's another reason why I'm not very much like I'm not in love with American foreign policy when it comes to the South China Sea. This is more the upholding of international law, and while I wish it wouldn't have to be a unilateral actor being the one to have to go in there to do it, in this case it sometimes isn't when it comes to the Philippines and Malaysia and Vietnam and Taiwan, of course, trying to uphold it.
Yeah. I know somebody in the chat asked about how do you feel about President Duterte of the Philippines and his coziness with China. And I think you were saying a moment ago that it stemmed from basically China claimed one of these islands. I think it was the Scarborough Shoal.
Scarborough Shoal, yep.
Yeah, you can see it here. It looks like it's a couple hundred miles east of Manila.
Yeah.
The Chinese claimed it, and the United States registered nothing but a formal
protest, a diplomatic protest. So, and while they haven't put any troops or anything on it, they don't want to heighten any tensions with the Philippines. Now the Philippines have got cozier to China because they feel like if we can't.
That was Obama, right?
Yes, that was under Obama. That's probably one of his worst decisions.
Yeah. So the Philippines, I think they've been disenchanted by the response they've gotten from China. I think, and they're now looking back at the United States. But it was a totally preventable pivot, by the Philippines. We could have kept them on our side by
Most definitely. Now, of course, that's not to excuse Duterte's horrible government when it comes to him asking for the population to slaughter drug addicts. Of course, that personally for me, that's a big thing. But then his own son being caught with some of the most copious amounts of those same drugs, and him, of course, getting an excuse. I mean, this is how these types of governments work.
Did he have a good excuse, or was it like, well, the cops planted it on him?
I mean, what kind of excuse could it have come up with?
I don't know. I was curious if
I was testing it to make. If I snort it all up, then there'll be no drugs left in the Philippines. I don't know.
Oh man. Guess who says South China Sea is having massive rapid economic growth with the booming economy in Vietnam. With trade, China wants to control that traffic flow.
Of course, yes. Their trade routes are not only an important economic resource, but of course strategic, because in the event of a conflict, for whatever reason, they would need to control their trade routes. Man. And not to mention that a huge amount of global trade travels through the South China Sea, nevertheless, of their own trade.
Man. Pretty crazy. So what do you
Thank you for helping me make that YouTube video. Now I don't need to talk about it on my channel.
No. I mean, I thought it's a good discussion. It's an interesting, it's a really interesting topic. So, what do you think about,
by the way, Taiwan's elections is this weekend. So
yeah, actually, that's what I was going to ask you about Taiwan.
Oh, lovely. This is actually I've been called, and I disagree with this classification, but I've been called a hawk on this issue, and I actually disagree with that classification.
Okay. Well, it came up yesterday. The issue of Taiwan came up yesterday because, I was talking about how I don't know how it came up, but basically I said that I think it would be absolutely that if the Chinese invaded Taiwan, it would be totally it would be completely, like, for us it would be as if, I think in every meaningful sense, as if they tried to invade the United States, in the sense this is a part of the free world that if they can just crush it through violent force, then the game is up. If we just let that go, then where does it stop? So I was saying that I think that the U.S. defense pact with Taiwan is a positive good, and that I think that would be just the most legitimate use of American power that I could think of. What do you think about that? Do you think do you think the United States should be involved there, or should it just let events unfold as they go, or how do you feel
I
about
actually
that?
agree with you. I actually agree with you on this one.
Okay. Well,
and that's why I've been called a hawk, because
really?
I just believe in Taiwanese sovereignty.
I don't even, I think you can even I think you could even hold the somewhat contradictory position of, well, it's a part of China, but that doesn't mean they should be condemned.
I don't even believe that. I don't even believe that.
Yeah.
If a people want their own government and they want to be independent of any other government in the world, I believe they have the right to do so. Yeah. Not to mention the otherworldly circumstances of the creation of Taiwan, the different culture that has somewhat developed there, their different sense of independence. I mean, not to mention they have their own functioning government, they have own functioning everything, and not to mention the amount of violence that might have to take place for reunification. Well, there's no real reason for Taiwan to try to reunify.
Well, the reason I think you could thread the needle and claim that China and Taiwan are one country, while we should nevertheless defend Taiwan from the rest of China, is that Taiwan claims to be the legitimate government of all of China. So, I mean, it's like, at that point, I mean, I guess to them, it's like imagining if the Confederacy took... Kite's not a fan of this notion either. It's like if the Confederacy took everything but Hawaii, I mean, would that legitimate that kind of the conquest of the country by what amounts to a criminal conspiracy? I mean, anyway, this is all nonsense, I guess, that I'm getting into here.
Well, number one, that would have to say that in the year 1945, the CCP was the universally recognized government of China, which is not true. There was a whole civil war, and it was of course divided on who supported. The CCP was actually one of the governments that was least recognized when it came to that, and it took a very long time after they unified the country for many countries to even get around to the fact that this is probably a government we should have relations with.
Yeah, until the 70s, actually. I think China generally only had relations with some of the countries in the developing world and the communist bloc, but otherwise it was more than just the CCP, right? I mean, it's the, it's like, you know, it's the, you know, they're right up there with Iran as like a civilizational state, you know? So there's some, I understand the notion of like, I don't want to declare our separateness from, you know, what, I mean, even though it's currently ruled by the CCP, our separateness from, you know, this institution that is called China. You know what I mean? Like, I understand that. I would imagine, though, anybody who wants to join while the CCP is in charge is an extremist.
I would actually say that continually, and I still see this, that most people are saying, when it comes to the people who want unification, definitely people who actually have legislative power, they will use the one country, two systems as the model.
Really? Yeah,
and
that's
consistently
insane.
said that that's the way to go forward, even with what's going on in Hong Kong.
No, how
They
could you
continue to hold that up.
How could you imagine that that would stick? Like, now there is demonstrable proof that it will not stick. That
I will say, honestly, most of them will just kind of, like, if somebody asks them about that, they get nervous. They kind of try to brush over it and get around it. And it seems like they just want they want to get the first foot in the door, the CCP's foot in the door, and then let everything advance from that point.
I just don't I don't understand that side of it, because they're doing. I mean, Taiwan is one of the most successful. You know, I mean, it's one of the most successful countries in the world. You know, they're not. They don't lack for anything other than international recognition.
I mean, of course, they have internal domestic issues that all nations have.
Like, nothing though that would be improved by joining China. You know?
No, I mean the best argument that is usually brought about is like economic cooperation could help with those things.
Yeah.
But then for me, it's like my personally, I will take my personal freedoms over your short-term economic benefit of a nation that relatively looks like it's losing its labor pool advantage.
Yeah, that's true. China's got like what 20 good years left in terms of that like labor pool advantage, and then it's going to
Well,
age
the problem is
quickly.
they've developed well, this is not a really problem in my opinion, but they've developed a middle class.
Yeah.
But that means they're losing that kind of low-skill labor pool that has defined the Chinese economy for a very long time. And so from what I've heard, and I'm not an economist, I will not claim to be, they have looked abroad for that in other countries in the region, and some have particularly looked to Africa.
Yeah, I want to see China's population. Like, there's what I'm trying to get at here. I don't know. Gosh, their population is like there's something about it where it's like it's the one-child policy combined with the enrichment of the country has meant that what would have happened in China, like what has naturally happened in the United States without immigration, which is population growth pretty well ends. They've sped that up with the one-child policy.
Yes,
So-
that was such a blunder, and now they didn't even like get rid of the policy.
Yeah.
Now
Now it's like the
just a
two-child policy.
policy.
Folks, I'm having trouble zooming in here, so take a look. But you can see from the long arc of this chart, the top of the arc of population, it crests in 2030, and then by 2035 it starts to slope down. And while that may not seem like a big deal, the reason why it's so important is that China's advantage has been in cheap labor, and two, this shrinking population is going to make it very difficult to deal with some, you know, the rising number of elderly people. They're not going to have any immigration. It's not good. I do like, though, that Yarki says China's population pyramid looks like Taipei 101. An example of Taiwan's economic success. Taipei
While I
101.
can't comment on immigration efforts, I don't know much about immigration efforts. I
Well,
know that the one-child policy has definitely crippled retirement for many Chinese people because they don't have enough children to take care of them, for instance, or that has hurt the economy due to the fact that many Chinese children have to split taking care of their parents and working because they have two parents and they have to work and there's nowhere else for them to go.
Yeah. And the Surfs is right that China is definitely different from the USSR in the way that the economy reformed. And the USSR, we actually were talking about this a few minutes earlier. They tried in the 1980s to implement some of the Chinese reforms, but the Soviet institutions were much less flexible than the Chinese institutions of the time. And so the Soviets were not able to make that. They just couldn't make that transition. Gorbachev's democratization was an attempt to make an end run around these fixed Soviet institutions, and just the whole system collapsed before he could basically make it work along Chinese lines. So, Tory News just rated us with a party of 28. Thank you so much, Tory News. I appreciate that. It's good to have you, buddy. We're talking with Dylan Burns here about China and just all about the good old world. Branxer says, Soviet kid here. Welcome, comrade. It's good to have you.
And I do want to say that 2 years ago, the party that the ruling party had a horrible midterm defeat. It was looking very bad for the party. So the fact that they've been able to turn it around in such a small amount of time is baffling, but has definitely been contributed by China's actions in Hong Kong, and the other parties viewed as quite kissy huggy with the CCP.
Wow. Yeah.